All right, welcome everyone to our open conversation with Transform Network. And you are joining us live tonight as we are having a conversation on race. Are we okay, technical guru? Are we good?
Yeah, we're looking great. Hello, everyone.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So, like I said, welcome. My name is Micky ScottBey Jones, and conversation with Transform Network.
Okay, hold up one second. I have a technical note. Anybody who has YouTube going on their computer, we're going to hear ourselves with a delay.
We're good?
Yeah, we're looking great. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Great. Thank you for shutting that down. Okay, carry on. Thank you.
All right, everybody, like I said, I'm Micky ScottBey Jones, and I would like to welcome you to the first Transform Open Conversation of 2015. Yay, I just imagine everybody at home is going, yay, screaming. And I want to introduce you first to the Transform Network, just so you know a little bit about what Transform is. And what we do is we mobilize activists and missional practitioners for social transformation. And what we believe is simple: love God, love your neighbor, and take collective action. And you can, of course, find us online at transformnetwork.org. And in our open conversations, what we want to do is, this is a free, fun, informative, challenging, spiritually minded conversations on faith and justice. And you can check out our past conversations, of course, at the transformnetwork.org website under the Action tab. So just go there and under the Action tab. And once a month from now through April at least, on a variety of topics, we're going to be, most of the topics relating to things that will be explored in more depth in our gathering this April. But we'll be having these meetings every month so that you can have a place to go and discuss things. So go to transformnetwork.org and you can sign up for the email newsletter and be notified about our next conversation. Of course, we're on Facebook too, facebook.com/transformnetwork, and on Twitter at trans, TRANS, the number 4M, and that's where you can find us there too. So I'm going to start by introducing myself, and then and our team here, and then everybody who's on the panel tonight is going to introduce themselves, because it's a little bit easier that way, and they can just explain who they are. So first, like I said, my name is Micky ScottBey Jones, and it's there on the screen. And I am the Director of Training and Program Development for Transform Network. And Holly, who will be in and out, is she is our technical guru for the evening. And so she will be assisting people in the chat on YouTube. So she'll be helping you guys interact with us as well. And working out all of our technical stuff. So tonight we are joined by Bec Cranford-Smith. Hello. You gonna wave? Wave! And Brittini Gray. And Robyn Henderson-Espinoza. Yay! And so let's start with you, Bec. You can introduce yourself and tell us all about who you are.
Hey, I'm Bec Cranford-Smith, and I am a volunteer coordinator at one of Atlanta's largest homeless service agencies, the Gateway Center, and I also am pastor of Church of the Misfits, which is outside the perimeter here in Atlanta. So 8 generations from West Georgia and trying somewhere to find Jesus amongst Southern Fried Christianity.
Fantastic. Okay, and next, let's go to Robyn.
Hi, I'm happy to be here in conversation with everyone. I currently live in Denver, Colorado, where I'm finishing a PhD in philosophy and theology, and I'm just about finished with the dissertation. And I'm excited to, to be in conversation, certainly about race and theology. I'm born of a Mexican mother who is not from this country. Though I have light skin privilege, and so I negotiate these race conversations very carefully as a light skin mestizaje. But I'm very excited to be on this panel with everyone.
Yay. Perfect. And Brittini.
Hello, my name is Brittini Gray. I am a community organizer in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been with Metropolitan Congregations United for a few years, originally born and raised in Chicago. So race is a very intimate place for me, coming from an urban experience. I am also a Master's of Divinity student at Eden Theological Seminary. So thank you for having me.
Yay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm so excited about this conversation. So we are just going to jump right in, and I wanted to start kind of with where we start at Transform. And so our kind of guiding motto or statement is love God, love your neighbor, take collective action. And I personally think Jesus was a pretty good example of all three of these things. You could even call Jesus a community organizer, if you think about it. So how do you think people of faith can engage these concepts, the love God, love your neighbor, take collective action, when it comes to racial justice? So how about Robyn? Let's go to you first.
Sure. I think that the church and historically, the practice, or the study of theology has had a hard time dealing with race. We see a pretty heavy commitment to Eurocentrism and whiteness throughout theology and throughout, in what is taught in seminaries. And what's really great about the stories of Jesus is that, this man, Jesus, the stories that we have, he continually crossed boundaries and continually crossed borders between race and gender and class. And so we have a great example just in the Gospels on how we should live out our Christian faith, and our theologies that we teach in seminary and preach from the pulpit on Sunday should certainly reflect these commitments. And I think that when you think about race and theology, I think mostly about the work that James Cone has done. I think about the work that Dolores Williams has done, where they have really, and of course countless others, Latina feminists as well, who have sought to address the overwhelming racism and sexism in theology, but particularly that these moments of theological rupture have been about liberation. That in order for us to think racially about theology, we need to also think about the liberation of oppressed people. And if we cannot think about that oppression in the ways in which we have all contributed to oppression in society, I think that then our theologies are lacking. So that's sort of my starting point as I think about race and theology. That it's really about liberation. It's really about crossing borders and crossing boundaries, and we need to be committed to that type of work.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. So Brittini, I know you're a faith-based organizer in your work, and you do a lot of work with churches. So I'm sure you have some really specific things about love God, love your neighbor, take collective action that you've seen in practice. Could you talk to that a little bit?
So I think, as the larger church, we do really good with loving God. That's like the epitome of our faith. And then we stretch ourselves and we say, okay, I'll love my neighbor as well. And a lot of times that comes out in the personal relationships that we have, or is represented in charity. But the key to that is to take collective action. And so one of the things about being a faith-based organizer is that you get those congregations that understand the value of that collective action. Unfortunately, faith-based community organizing across all networks only accounts for 1% of our congregations, which means that by and large, our congregations are not taking collective action in a way that leads to racial justice, in a way that we think about the work that Jesus did. And so I think getting that disconnect taken care of in the church, where we actually understand our faith and us following Jesus to go beyond just what we say to each other, but to really go into the public arena and address those issues that we have. To me, that's where it really begins to distinguish between where we are and where we can be.
Okay, so Brittini, what you're saying is you see that gap between the love God, love your neighbor. A lot of people seem to be getting that, but in the churches that you work with, or maybe before they bring you in, they don't really know how to take it to the collective action step.
Right. I'm saying that the church's collective action has not involved the work of justice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so, and Bec, I know you have some experience with this in a specific subset of Christianity. Bec, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Are you? Uh-oh, sorry. Here we go. Try that. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you. Uh-oh. We don't have her? Nope.
Pentecostals, maybe progressive Pentecostals.
Hey, Bec, start
We're
over.
gone.
We just got you back. We just got you back. Start again.
There we go. All right, cool. So I was thinking about a go-back tradition for somebody. If we look at a tradition socially, we've allowed world systems to creep in, like racism and classism and sexism. But if we look at certain movements within the context of American religion, we see that they fostered a lot of liberation at their very starts. For instance, Pentecostalism, which was started by William Seymour, who was an African-American man who received fire from on high, if you will, and was able to spread that message of the charismata, or the works of the Spirit. And then we see the next person having that experience was Agnes Osmond. And at the beginning of the Roots, it was very much a racially unified organization, and it went out with women and men. But sadly, these world systems crept back in. So I think my call to the church that may find themselves in that quasi-weird, maybe Pentecostal space, is to go back to tradition and open up those lines again.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. It can be helpful for people to look into their traditions and see where there were, brave individuals who broke out, who did something different, who refused to stick with the status quo. Different theologians and pastors and community workers who stood for racial justice even when it wasn't popular. Even when it wasn't the norm. I would say it's still not the norm today. So we still have the people that are standing up today are still having to stand up and be brave and do what's different. All right, so let's talk about how people of faith are being moved today to get involved. We've talked about going from a moment, right? There's been this moment for many people when they found out about the tragic killing of Michael Brown or Eric Garner, or even a little farther back, Trayvon Martin was something that really brought a lot of people into this conversation. And it's turned into a movement. And we can even look back, right? The same thing. A lot of people say the same thing about Emmett Till, that it was his death and then his mother's bravery and refusal to back down and refusal to hide what had happened to her son, and that became part of the catalyst for the civil rights movement in the 60s. And so I think we're again seeing a similar thing here with Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and others. So what is it about these moments that are becoming a movement that has resonated with people of faith that have, maybe not been as involved in the past 10, 20, 30 years? What's resonating with people now? What's moving people to action? Why are people in and outside of the church finally seeing this as not just a moment, not just another death, but seeing it as something that's finally waking people up? Who wants to tackle that first? Anyone?
I mean, I can talk a little bit about, this weekend, Jesse Hernandez was shot and killed by Denver police. And, I think, the Michael Brown and Eric Gardner has been such a public moment for all of us. And now some of our other cities are being hit with the reality of police brutality and the sort of lethal killing, the lethal force, And I know that, at least here in Denver, clergy and community leaders are just taking to government buildings and standing up and saying this is enough. And I think for a lot of us who care about these sorts of things and the proliferation of violence in systems, I think we're all just saying this is enough. And I think that, at least in conversations that we've had in the past, that this is a Kairos moment, right? Mm-hmm. This is a moment where we all are sort of seeking God to be present in this world, and recognizing the deep, deep, deep infrastructure of oppression and of sin that's in the world, and trying to negotiate those two things is killing people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bec, what are you seeing?
I think piggyback, it is very much a Kairos moment. Jesus had the Roman road, and we have the internet. So his gospel was spread because of the road, and I think the gospel is being spread really because of the internet, because more people are in. When I get up and I check Twitter or I check Facebook, I cannot help but being inundated by what's really happening in our world. So I think the church is becoming aware of that, and I also think that more people are aware that maybe they were merely a cultural Christian, so they were just going through the motions, or because they were born in the South, they were followers of Jesus, but I mean, not followers of Jesus, but they were, in this kind of cultural bubble. So hopefully discipleship can move us forward as well. Particularly within Atlanta, I'm seeing the networking of the NAACP along with the Concerned Black Clergy and Moral Monday. I myself am not on the front lines with Moral Monday here in Atlanta, but they're doing a lot of good, and they're opening up networks. The open community here in Atlanta has been one that has just pushed the issue of race.
Oh. We lose her.
Looks like Bec is frozen up over on her end.
Okay. So, Brittini, let's go to you and find out what you're seeing there in St. Louis area.
It's not as if the execution of Black people and people of color is something that's new. And I don't know what creates a movement, but I do believe that one of the ways that we still know the spirit is moving today is through moments that become movements. And so what we had here in St. Louis was just an overwhelming outpour, I think, of God's spirit in the street, and people that are not what we traditionally think of as God's people. And I think that that's beautiful, because oftentimes as Christians we're so caught up in being set apart that we don't take into account the ways that God moves even outside of us. And so people of faith are being forced to respond because young people my age who were not in the church chose to respond. And when you have a country like America, we hold on so dearly to movements of the past, but we don't take into account that movements can happen today. And so right now we're in the midst of a movement happening, and there's a lot of tension. There's people who don't understand what's going on. There are people who don't want to what's the word I'm looking for? Who don't want to recognize what's going on. And you have people in St. Louis and now across the country saying, you're gonna know. There's no way that we're going to continue to allow you to kill us in the street and not make a noise about it. And so it's nothing more than God's spirit, I think.
Brittini, do you think that the church is starting to recognize this movement in kind of across the board, or do you think it's still kind of slowly picking up steam? It's more outside of the church that people are recognizing the movement, or do you think the church is really kind of getting it at this point?
I'd say we're somewhere in between. You definitely have more congregations stepping up to the plate. Just this Sunday, our organization launched Sacred Conversations on Race, and we anticipated about 30 congregations to be there, and we had over 60. And I think that you can see that across the country as Moral Monday movements are taking root in other cities and other states. Here we have Moral Missouri. So there are definitely indicators that the church is waking up, but we have to learn how to adjust to a movement that is not based from us. So we like to look at the civil rights movement as the ideal pinnacle success of the church. But it wasn't the church that said Black Lives Matter. It wasn't the church that said hands up, don't shoot. And so part of that challenge is figuring out where our role is in a movement that we did not begin. That does not mean that it's a movement that we cannot sustain and participate in going forward. And I think that's the challenge to congregations, is to figure out what is the role that we can play collectively.
Yeah, that's really good. How do we get into this and in a supportive role, that a movement we didn't necessarily start? And I think that amount of humility, especially from pastors, is something that we've seen be somewhat difficult, especially male pastors. Just being seen as the traditional leaders, and then maybe not. The women that are leading, the young people that are leading, being looked over when it comes to organizing and other people coming into a city and things like that. Holly, did you have something?
Yeah, we've got some engagement from some viewers here on YouTube. We have Randy Woodley with us, and he's quoting a saying, "The church is becoming aware." Someone said the church is becoming aware. He said, laudable but very wishful thinking. It might be better to distinguish between the fringe who are becoming aware and educating the majority who are not aware. And then he says in a subsequent comment, how do we bridge the gap between these two realities? A good question for the group.
Kind of the reality between the margins and the center.
Yeah, the fringe who are becoming aware and educating the majority who are not aware. How do we bridge the fringe and the majority?
Robyn, did you have something on that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to respond to that, but I also want to pick up on what Brittini was saying about here you have people coming out into the streets. You didn't know they were God's people, right? Who are saying enough with the execution of black and brown bodies. And I want to say that the system or the center or the stability of what is the church may not be the church at all. It may be the misfits. It may be the outcast. It may be the margins. It may be the indecent, right? It may not be the folks holding the power that is the church. And for so many of our theologies, theologies are produced from the center without a deep recognition and attentiveness to the margins. And I think what Brittini was saying of who is coming out in support of stopping the executions of black and brown bodies is precisely the church that we need to invest in.
Yeah, that's good. Really good. Bec, did you have something else on that? No. Okay, I thought she had something else. Brittini?
So I hear that there's a question about who's organizing right now. And is this correct? Yes, is that?
Yeah.
Yes. So it was a comment on how a lot of the kind of organizing of the civil rights movement was, the groups that we don't hear about as much, the people we don't hear about as much, the people on the ground, the especially in the South, right? There were, farmers and women and mothers and people that were organizing. It wasn't just Martin Luther King, and that's what we get even in Selma, right? That's who's kind of put forward as doing the work, but really the heavy lifting was the people in community. So I don't know if you could kind of speak to what you're seeing in St. Louis and Ferguson. I think sometimes people outside of there, there was the hubbub a few weeks ago, I guess, when Selma released, when Oprah was basically like, well, marches are great, but when are we going to see some organized struggle? And everybody, that's been out there for, the past, 150, 160 days was like, we're doing stuff. It's organized, And so I think people don't often see that. So maybe you could speak to what you are seeing as being organized, especially there in St. Louis and Ferguson.
So, there are sectors and levels. So you have your traditional organizing networks that are both secular and faith-based. And so our project here in St. Louis is part of the Gamaliel Network. And then there's also PICO, Interfaith, IAF, and DART, I think, cover the traditional faith-based groups. And so all of those networks have responded to Ferguson in its own and unique way, which means that you have it covering about half of the United States along just with those different projects. You also have your more traditional based organizations from unions and everything in between, so things like Job with Justice, other things here such as MORE and OBS that have been established and have been doing the work. But what you're also noticing is a huge influx of extreme grassroots met on the protest line organizing that's going on. And so here in St. Louis, we have probably over 100 different groups that have formed. Some are just clusters of people of 3 and 4. Others have 100 and 200 people. And so it's important to know that you're not going to see all those different names out there, but there's no way that we get here nearly 6 months later without organizing going on. And the same can be said across the country. Black Lives Matter is not just a phrase or a slogan or a hashtag. It's a group of people who are working and organizing around systemic issues. BYP 100, Black Youth Project, based outside of Chicago. So there are plenty of groups that have either been doing this work or have really taken on this work specifically since the murder of Mike Brown. And so I don't want to get us into this mindset or mold that nobody's doing the work. And if there is nobody doing the work in your city, then there's the opportunity for you to create the organizing that needs to take place where you are.
Yeah, and I'm seeing the same thing in Nashville. We, you know, there have been some students that have gotten together, different organizations, and a lot of kind of that intersectional justice. So like you were saying, Brittini, we have people that are working on wages, we have people that are working on LGBTQ rights, and people who are specifically working on race, all coming together in these, you know, citywide coalitions. The one we founded is Liberate Nashville, right? And so it's a group of people that all come together. We go to each other's marches and activities, and you see these smaller groups get together for larger things as well as doing their own events. So I see that's happening in Nashville. It may not be happening everywhere. I don't know, Robyn and Bec, if you are also seeing this in your areas. And I know Holly has some experience with faith-rooted organizing, especially the work that's both kind of started by Alexia Salvatierra and inspired by her, but we see that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about Alexia and about kind of this effort to have a place where faith-rooted organizers and resource people for faith-rooted organizing can be found. We're launching a website called faithrootedorganizing.net, and it is an unnetwork of faith-rooted organizers. We're not raising money. We're just literally trying to serve as a movement resource because there's so many of us who are doing this work. And I just also, as an older person on this call, want to talk maybe about how in 2001, Idris Stelly was gunned down, shot 10 times by cops. He was an African-American man, unarmed, at the movie theater at the Metroplex in San Francisco. And, you know, we marched with them, and we mourned with the family and community that lost Idris Stelly. And I was just kind of doing a search on the internet, and there's in the San Francisco Bay Guardian, they're talking about how the cops who shot this 19-year-old kid were not released, and that there was, at the time, this is 6 months later, they're writing and they're saying how they can't find out the names of the cops who shot this kid. And so I think that this Kairos moment that we're coming to is a long time coming. I think that communities have been facing police violence for a long time. It's why, you know, Van Jones started Cop Watch out of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in Oakland, you know, almost 15 years ago. So I think it's really great that it's so on the forefront of people's consciousness now, and it really does feel like that moment where it becomes more of a movement, like you said. It's brilliant.
So, Bec, what are you seeing in Atlanta?
Yeah, so there's a lot of organizing going on around various issues, and there's some hope of some more Mondays doing a lot of stuff. As I said, the Open Door community has been very active in speaking to Georgia's capital punishment. They went out and protested and held vigil last night for Warren Hill. So that's been a lot that's been going on. Specifically within the LGBT community here, we've got Georgia Marriage Equality. We've got a lot of people that are working together to try to change the scene in Atlanta. But we just had an election, and the whole state went red, and it seems like anything that we could do to try to help with some legislation has changed. So I don't know how. I'm hoping that the church, the Big C church all over the place, can get more aware of it. But I also hope for some more interfaith alliances. I mean, we have Atlanta Interfaith Alliance here, and it's working great. But there could be a lot more connectivity. So hopefully, as Robyn was saying, all God's children.
Mm-hmm. All right, so
That's my dog.
we have Bec's dog trying to get in on the conversation here. All right, so we have a question from a viewer. That sounds weird to say. So I'd love it if you guys could tackle this. Is the fact that it isn't the churches that are organizing, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, an important difference between this movement and the civil rights movement? How important is that? Does it matter that much? Should we be concerned about it? Does that mean our tactics have to be different? What is What does that even mean?
Well, I don't want to make it so black and white. I think churches are organizing. I mean, we see Brittini's example. So I think churches are organizing. I think that what we recognize as church may not be the cathedral on the corner, right? The church are the hordes of people who are coming out in opposition to police violence and execution-style murder.
Yeah, for sure. Brittini, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. So, you know, I come from a faith-based perspective of organizing. So there's organizing taking place. And I don't want us to idealize the civil rights movement too much. It wasn't like 60, 80% of congregations were participating in the movement. You had a very small fraction of churches that were driving the charge. And when the call was put out, then you had another fraction who responded and would show up when needed. But it was never an overwhelming presence of churches that did the work for the civil rights movement. I don't think that's any different than today. The Moral Monday movement, outside of organizing networks, is another example of how we have that going on. So I don't want to negate the organizing that's going on, but I will say that there can always be more.
Sure.
And Micky, I just was seeing here that there's a question around whether or not it's disingenuous to tackle all of these issues together, whatnot. And I want to say I think probably Bec and Brittini can also speak to this, is that if we make this a single issue movement or a single issue moment, affecting oppressions that are death bringing. And so I think it's hugely important to address this as an intersectional movement and not make it about a single issue moment.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really important. And what I'm seeing, what I saw when I've been in Ferguson a few times, is that something I haven't seen take place in the church, among Christians, is that the young people that started organizing from day one said, we will not let anything stand in the way of what we know needs to be done. So, you know, maybe I didn't have any gay friends before now, but you know what, you're gay, I don't care, we're going to get in the street and march together. Whatever we need to do to get the freedom we need to get, we're going to do it. We will set things aside. So, I mean, is that right? Is that what you're seeing, Brittini?
Ask me the question one more time, because I'm still processing parts of these questions and things.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot going on here. That it seems like the young people and people of any age that have gone out and started those hundreds of groups that are on the ground and that are marching together and organizing together. They've done what I don't see in the church a lot, which is setting aside these issues. Like one kid may have never talked to somebody who was gay before, and they're like, I didn't like gay people before, but you're going to march with me? Okay, well, let's go. And they will set aside things they thought they didn't agree on to get everybody free. Whatever it takes, we're going to work together on the larger issues.
Right, exactly. This is not a one-issue movement. And quite frankly, you really don't get a movement with just one particular issue. What you have is the insistence that intersectionality matters. And I think that's one of the most important things for the church to learn and to understand, is that, I mean, life itself is complex. As human beings, we have complexities. And so for us to go into the public arena and not to bring those complexities, celebrate those complexities while working to address what comes with those complexities, is a grave injustice.
Yeah, that's good. Bec, your position is a little different in that you're working with people that are living outside for the most part. They have their own issues as well. but there's been a lot of discrimination against them, but maybe you've seen people working together in ways before because they had to. Are you seeing a change in that, or are you seeing, what are you seeing with that kind of real? That's always been grassroots work. You know what I'm saying?
So I think within the homeless community here in Atlanta, there still tends to be some. So I still think there may be some transphobia still. So maybe particularly within subsectors of homelessness that are closer to downtown. But as people get to know each other and they start eating a meal with each other, or maybe trying to find shelter with each other, they begin to see each other as human. So we do see a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness working together, whether they're lesbian, Latino, Black, Korean, having left sex trafficking, immigrants, victims of systematic racism, injustice, and whether they're leaving the foster care system or the prison system. So there is a type of solidarity because it says you understand what it is to go through the suffering and to feel invisible, because at the end of the day, folks who are experiencing homelessness in Atlanta are so invisible to so many of us.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so talking some more about kind of friction between different groups. We have a question here from Khaled, and he says, can anyone speak to the fear or not of the powers that be co-opting the energy for their own needs? So like Al Sharpton with maybe some of the younger people, there's been some conflict there, or diluting it into, the hashtag All Lives Matter. When somebody says Black Lives Matter, getting hit with that. So, Robyn, let's talk to you about that.
Yeah, I've been a part of some of these conversations across the country around the ways in which largely white folks have been responding to the Black Lives Matter movement with All Lives Matter. And I think it's more than dilution. I think it is an attempt to equalize all bodies. And I think what the reality that we live in now is that not all bodies matter, and not all bodies have the same opportunity, right? We have an overwhelming reality of white privilege in this country and across the world. And when we say something like All Lives Matter, we continue to diminish bodies of color in ways where they cannot sustain themselves. And so the Black Lives Matter movement is such an important movement for us not only to disrupt and destabilize white privilege and the overwhelming commitment that folks have to their privilege, but it's also an attempt to say, no, we aren't going to let largely, the dominant community to dictate to us what matters and what doesn't, right? I mean, I think throughout history, bodies of color, women of color, men of color, have been fighting to have a voice. You see this in even slave narratives where you have slaves singing the gospel because their voice mattered, and if they could create a rhythm that was particular to their existence, that meant a certain stream of liberation for them on some level. And so you have this in the Latino community, you have this in other communities as well. And I think that for us to minimize Black Lives Matter and raise up All Lives Matter just so that we can be equal and free together, I think it's wrong. I think it's bullshit.
All right. All right, Brittini, what about you?
Yeah, so every piece of that hashtag is a statement in itself. Blackness, what is often seen as the epitome of what is dark and bad, to be proclaimed as worthy is a challenge to our worldview as a society. To then say that we have lives, right? Because oftentimes it's not only that our bodies aren't valued, but we're like this superhuman type monster, right? Like, these are the type of narratives that have informed us throughout the history of this country, which made it okay for black men and women and children to hang from trees for so many years. And then to say they matter, to declare in what seems ridiculous and redundant in 2015 or 2014 when we began this, is encapsulates everything about us that is disregarded. Somebody asked about the shucks, where'd it go? Use me instead. When the Miami Police Department was caught using mugshots of black men for target practice, and particularly white clergy responded, posting their pictures on social media with that hashtag. While good intentioned, I believe, primarily, that does not speak to the history of our country. It is not a matter of whose photo it is. It's a matter of the race of the photo. And if that had not been true, then what we wouldn't have are numerous black men, unarmed, who don't pose a threat, murdered in streets, when white men who go on killing sprees are arrested and put on trial. I think we just have to account for everything that is our history, and it does not negate the church and its role and responsibility in responding to that in a way that is compelling and shows solidarity. But to be the great white hope and the savior through All Lives Matter and use me instead is not the way for us to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you better preach, girl.
Get it.
That was fantastic. And just to add to the use me instead, again, I think you're right. I think it was well intended. I think it was a rush to step up and show solidarity. But what it also revealed, as we started to peel it back a little bit, was the privilege, right? Because I couldn't send my picture in as a black seminarian because that could actually legitimately happen to me. Cornel West couldn't put use me instead because he could really just get shot as a black clergyman. Like, so it does take a level of privilege to say use me instead, because that means you wouldn't normally be the one getting shot at. So, I think that it started to reveal what we were dealing with there as another layer of privilege. And again, that doesn't make the people bad that did it, but it's another chance for us to step back and look at it and go, oh yeah, this is more complex than we want to really admit to. All right, so we've been talking about a lot of different things, and I feel like we haven't sprinkled enough Jesus on top, right? Oh wait, Bec wants to say something about All Lives Matter. You want to say something before we move on to Jesus? Because we got to talk about more Jesus.
Yay, Jesus. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I was thinking. We start talking about All Lives Matter. It's kind of like when my friends who are straight say in Christ there is neither slave nor free, nor bond, nor female nor male. And I get that, but at the same time, within the Corinthians church, Paul talks about the diversity of the body and how that is super important. So we need to celebrate diversity, and we don't need to just homogenize it into one classification, because really that's not just brushing it away and saying, oh, we all matter. What it's really saying is you as a woman are unique and individual, and you matter, and I need you. And you as an African American are unique and amazing, and I need you. And you as a trans man are unique and wonderful, and I need you. So like it's like we have to have that diversity to be that body, because if we're just homogenized and we're just one big group, then how are we to bounce things off? How are we to have the different perceptions that are going to open up interpretations so that we can have a wider, more robust interpretation of Scripture and how we do church? So we need that diversity. So no, I don't think it's okay to say all lives matter. I mean, yes, fundamentally they do. But what is more okay is to say Black lives matter, is to say lesbian lives matter, is to say homeless lives matter, and to say that these individual facets of humanity matter, and they matter to Jesus. So that's my Jesus sprinkle or baptism, whatever you want to say.
All right, Bec's getting a little Pentecostal on us. So Brittini, in there too.
You know, somebody talked about we have to address the institutional racism in our country. The church is an institution that is not exempt from that whatsoever. And it's not just in our country. It is the foundation of our religion. So Jesus' ministry was, by and large, committed to crossing the boundaries that society had put in place. So when he met the Samaritan woman at the well, not only was she a woman, but she was also a Samaritan, an ethnic group of people that they did not associate with. And so this is nothing new. This is as old as time. We continue to create barriers and systems that celebrate and uplift people at the expense of other groups. And so if we truly are to call ourselves followers of Christ, then not only do we look outwards, but we look within at our own institution and our own faith and identify the areas that need improvement.
Yes, that is a perfect segue, because what I want to talk about is theologizing together. So looking at things like Scripture, the life of Jesus, our traditions, which is something Bec mentioned earlier. Some traditions look at reason. The Holy Spirit. Where do we get our theology of racial justice, of anti-oppression? What places are you guys going to get that theology, or where do you think Christians need to go to understand a theology, right, that helps us understand these issues and deal with them? Robyn, you want to tackle that first? Theologian?
Sure. I mean, in some ways, I would welcome the practitioners of the faith to respond to this, but I mean, I could start us off in saying that I think we cannot ignore our experience in the world. Whether we are tall, short, fat, skinny, black, brown, whatever, we have a particular experience in the world that tells us something about our belief positions, or the ways in which we respond to God working in the world. And if we aren't able to utilize our experience to formulate some ideas about God, then we are left to things like reason only, or the church fathers only. But remember, these people used a particular experience too. It just happened to be, a white male perspective. And so I really want to advocate for context and experience as we think about theologizing about race and the intersections of oppression.
That's good. Bec, did you have something about kind of mission, being on mission, and that type of thing?
Yeah, so I'm no theologian whatsoever. I have a master's of divinity, not divination. I got that from Hogwarts. But my master's in divinity kind of circulated around missiology and how we reach out to people when we are doing missions. And I've read a lot from Bob Lupton. And if you are, as a white clergy person, have not a great start on kind of urban transformation, but he talks in his one book, Toxic Charity, about the way that we do missions and how we really rob people of dignity, because we go in as the haves, and then there's these people who are the have-nots, and we're setting up one more power system to kind of overthrow someone. So maybe even the way in which we serve a meal can be oppressive. So a soup line says, I've got soup, you've got an empty bowl. But if we do a potluck, I mean, that whole, like, from a structural, spatial thing, is setting up a different kind of power structure that says there is no power. We come together at the table. The table is the great equalizer. So I think when we do our work in the community, we have to humble ourselves. We have to have that kind of kenosis moment from Philippians 2, humble ourselves, empty ourselves out, and be able to listen. I learn more. I'm blessed every day by people who are experiencing homelessness than I could ever give them as some suburban, 8th-generation West Georgian. But if I listen to the people who are experiencing homelessness, they bless me, they pour into me, and they give me wisdom. And that's what we have to get to. We have to get to this, what Steve Knight once called the humility and epistemology, right? So we have to just have humility in what we believe and how we take that on and be able to be lifelong learners. So that's my kind of theological, missiological spiel, if you will, is when we go in, we don't want to continue the systems of colonialization or imperialism or any sort of cultural hegemony, but we want to go in as humble and see how we can lift others up. So that's my piece.
Thank you. That's great. Brittini, could you speak to a little bit about how you're seeing churches that you're working with develop their theology around this?
Do me a favor and rephrase the question, please.
So, are you seeing them have to go back to the Bible, go to prayer? Where are they getting kind of how they understand why they would get involved with conversations about race or systemic oppression or any of those things? Are they having to kind of come up with new theologies, new reasons from Scripture and tradition that they would do it, or is it something that's already there but they weren't maybe paying attention to?
If we think about the Wesleyan quadrilateral, I think experience is weighing extremely heavy in the lives and ministry of clergy right now. So much so that it's forcing us to rethink how we look at Scripture, how authority has played out, in what ways our tradition has perpetuated the injustices that we see. But it's the experience, especially early on in the protest, the first 2-3 months, clergy were coming back from being out there on the front line as a support, literally changed. And I think that being there in the streets, through the tear gas, through all of it, the rubber bullets, truly challenged how we considered faith and the ways that we address theology. Our university dean, Deb Krause, spoke at our opening ceremony on Sunday for the Sacred Conversations, and the clarity in which she presented her case for why Black Lives Matter and how we must address racism from a white supremacist mindset that most people operate in was totally informed by the past 5 and 6 months that she's been out on those front lines.
Yeah, even for myself, as a seminarian, I had all but given up on ordination. For me, it became a matter of I did not need anyone to tell me that I could say the magic words or give out bread and wine. And it was, for me, the first at least 2 months, I was pretty much glued to my phone or computer late at night watching live streams and on Twitter every day and every night. And it was seeing the clergy out there with people and not seeing them run the show, but seeing them serve people is what made me be even open again to ordination. It changed to me what was sacred and the sacred things that pastors and priests did. So I think that's something that people are seeing, and I've talked to many people in their 20s who will still to this day say, I am not religious. I don't go to church, or if I do go to church, I'm going to church with one of these pastors that I see out here all the time. But they're respecting the pastors that are visiting them in jail when they get arrested for protesting, the pastors that are there for them, that are opening up their churches, that are being safe spaces. Those are the pastors that are getting these, getting young people to even step foot in a church, not because they're preaching at them, but because they're loving them. So we have burning questions, and it's the same burning question that I get all the time, that you guys probably get all the time if you post something about race on Facebook or you talk to people, you go give a talk, whatever. And it's, what can white people do? What can white clergy do? We have a lot of that question too. Glad to know we have so many white clergy listening in tonight, but they would like you guys to answer what you think white clergy, and I guess white people in general, should be doing in these times. Who wants to tackle that one first? Robyn?
Well, I mean, I think Bec was actually going to say something, and I'd love to defer to Bec if they want to say something.
So I was going to say that I think we should pass the mic to Brittini. I think we need to make space for others to share our platform and to be able to share.
So I'm supposing that's Brittini that we're passing.
That's you.
Oh my Lord, Jesus.
It's okay. So what should white clergy do? You asked the black woman on the panel. No problem. I mean, I can't exactly answer this question, but what I will say is that I think most white people have to really think about what does being in true relationship and community look like. We throw these words around like ally, like solidarity, without really thinking about what that looks like in a way that is both powerful and liberating. And so, to me, it's not about solidarity or allyship, but rather, what does it look like to truly be in relationship with somebody who has a totally different worldview than you? That relationship is going to be able to inform anything that you need to know about what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to echo that. A lot of times white folks just make the mistake of like going to their closest black friend and be like, what is going on? And I've held space for friends who are of color who are like, whoa, I'm processing this too. Like, I don't need the wave of your like white emotions over this. So I think it's okay for white people to talk to white people about race. I think it's a good idea. I think that we don't necessarily have to have, it's important to listen to those perspectives and pull them to the center when they want to be at the center. But I think that white people can do a lot of good work about race and really exploring our own unseen white privilege. And, finding out a lot, doing a lot of research. I think it's important that we don't always expect people of color to just teach us, because I'm sure that could be really an intense dynamic to always, have white people coming at you like that. So I like to talk to other white people about race, and a lot of white people don't think they have to think about race, and that there in itself is a privilege. And I think my other advice for white people is that we have to trust outside of our own experience. There are things that we are just not going to experience in the world the same way as, an African American woman or a 17-year-old boy. I am never going to see the world that way. I'm always going to be a white woman of privilege who doesn't get to see the world that way. So I need to trust outside of my experience, and that means listening and not challenging in hard moments like this.
Brittini, you had some other things too.
Yep. So I want to push it a little bit more, and I got some alliteration for you all. So not only do we need to relate, but also relinquish and reveal. So first, get into true relationship with people outside of your norm. And that doesn't just mean racially. That means socioeconomic, race, gender, sexuality, all of that. Relinquish power. The struggle here is about power. And so white people are going to have to learn how to take a back seat and give up some of that power if they truly believe in liberation. And if you're alongside of this movement, then you ought to believe in liberation. And then to reveal your true essence, right? So part of it is about understanding your privilege and what whiteness means, but it's also about being human in that relationship in a way that Black people and other people of color and other marginalized people want to be in relationship with you back.
Ooh, that's good, and that'll be easy for people to remember. Relate, relinquish, and reveal. Very good. Robyn, I would love for you to speak a little bit too. You're outside of this kind of black-white, spectrum, right? So you're coming in as another person of color, and we've seen, right? It's not just black and white, unfortunately, with what has just happened with Jesse. So if you could, speak to that a little bit.
I have spent a lot of time talking with some of my white colleagues who have been protesting throughout the country, and many of them, have asked, is it okay that I do this? And that's such a hard question for me to answer, because it's not whether it's right or wrong, but it is about the sort of recognition that they come with a type of privilege to this work that Black and brown bodies don't have. And I think being a light-skinned Mexican, I recognize that so much more, and how we navigate communities with light-skin privilege. And so I think when folks have white skin privilege, they have to be ready to recognize that they come with a certain amount of power to the movement. And that power isn't necessarily going to move the movement in the same way that Black and brown bodies' power is going to move the movement. And it may very well disrupt the movement in certain ways. And I don't necessarily think that disruption is bad. I just think we need to be aware that when white bodies are present, in places like when I went down to the MLK March last Monday before the Black Lives Matter conference, there was an overwhelming group of white folks part of this. I think it's great if folks want to be in solidarity with people of color, right? But it is about recognizing the power that the skin color holds, and the ways in which it reifies power structures and systems of dominance that people of color aren't able to dismantle yet. I mean, I think we are moving in that direction to be able to dismantle some of these systems, and it's taken some strategic thinking across difference not diversity, but rather difference, and we're learning how to do that. But I think, especially in the Latino community, with issues like immigration and whatnot, you have a whole bunch of white clergy who are like wanting to like stand up for family rights, and it's super problematic when it comes right down to it. When you have white folks advocating for a sort of white norm of what family structure looks like, right? I mean, it's so complicated and it's so tricky. But I never want to say to a white person, no, you shouldn't be doing this work. They absolutely should be doing this work, but they should be doing it in a way that supports the Black and brown voices that are already there, and they should be doing it in a way that supplements the already voices that are on the ground, and not trying to take over the movement in any way.
Yeah. That's good, and we have a question that kind of goes with that that I want Bec to speak to, and then actually I was hoping Brittini could talk about that as well. But the question between charity versus equity or justice, and it seems like the church is comfortable with charity. Christians are comfortable with charity, but not necessarily justice or equity. And so kind of maybe helping people move from one to the other, or are there different times for different things, and kind of helping people see the difference there.
Yeah, so one thing that I always think about is that when we drive by and we sandwich toss, it makes us feel good about ourselves, but what does it do to the people on the street who are hungry? So I think that our charity has to be done in a way that is not about ourselves, and oftentimes it is. It's kind of like the illusion of the parable about the Pharisee who goes out and toots his horn, right? And he goes and he does this service work, and it's kind of like our Facebook. I mean, like a lot of my white friends who go overseas and they do missions or whatever, they come back with these Facebook pictures and there's like tons of little brown children all around them. Is that doing anything for the brown children? Is that lifting them up? Is that giving them a voice? Or is it more about that white person being like, oh, look at me, I'm so awesome for Jesus, right? So like the way in which we do that, I think we need to go back and we need to be able to give those people a voice. So that's why we have things set up like the Faces of Homelessness Speakers Bureau. So you don't just hear Bec Cranford talking about homelessness. You're going to hear somebody who's been through a real deal experience of homelessness and be able to share their story. And not that there's any. Jay Baker once said there's no hierarchy in pain, so that doesn't mean that the folks who are in privilege don't experience pain or haven't went through suffering or trials, but we need to be able to have a space that's safe, that we lift up people and give them equity and justice, and that means, first of all, being heard. So I think we need to offer up platforms where people can share their stories to be heard. And I think, secondly, when we go out and we do charity work, there's a way that we do it. There's a Hebrew, an old Jewish proverb that says the highest form of charity is being able to give a man or a woman a job and them not know you were even behind it. The lowest form of charity is giving somebody money, because when we do that, we rob someone almost of a little bit of dignity. So I think there's ways that we need to reevaluate the way that we do charity, and how can we do that? How can we look at our short-term missions? How can we look at when we send a bunch of our kids down from the youth group into the city to do work? Like, what can we do? How can we back up? And how can we be present, like Robyn already said, like where God already is, where God's already doing something. So that's just my thoughts on it.
So Brittini, going in and organizing different churches and helping faith leaders get plugged in, and they may already be doing work that could be considered charity, but maybe not really doing things to dismantle oppression. So how do you help them to change what they're doing so it moves from just pure charity to dismantling oppression and actually working towards justice?
It's a paradigm shift, right? Charity feels good to people. People like to feel good when they've done something, to be able to look up and say, I have accomplished this. Justice work is long-term, grueling, often does not pay off immediately. And so first thing is getting people beyond the need to feel good, and to really understand why we have to address power. And so there's this conversation going on around, well, what is racism? And somebody defined it as power plus prejudice. And that's exactly what it is. And so if we do not begin to first get away from the feel-good mentality that comes with charity, for us to then be able to say, in what ways has the church's power been used to we're running over time. All right, in what ways has the church's power been used to promote that prejudice? And then in what ways do we need to address our prejudice? Then we begin to get somewhere. But until we can do that, then we're just playing around.
Yeah, I think you've got exactly what's going on. We need to address systems of power, both within the church and in our society at large. That is actually a perfect note to end on. We do need to get out of here because we've gone over time. As everybody knows, we could talk about this for hours and hours at a time. We need to be talking about it more. And so I'm so glad that so many people tuned in tonight. This will be available later on the Transform website. Like I said, you can see other open conversations from last year and other videos throughout the life of Transform are also on Transform Network website. And I just want to thank all of you, Bec, Brittini, Robyn, Holly, for your participation tonight. Thank you to everyone on YouTube for being here. You guys were having your own conversation there, giving us really great questions. We appreciate it. I hope you'll come back for the next one. The next one is February 18th. And we will be tackling urban transformation. We have some really, really great people joining us for that as well. You can also check the Transform website, again, transformnetwork.org, for updates. And please share that with your friends, pastors, priests, faith-rooted organizers in your life. And remember, you can still get a $99 ticket until the 31st of this month to come to our amazing gathering April 23rd through 25th, where you can talk to all of these amazing people that we've been with tonight. You can see all of them, talk with them, theologize with them. We're going to be together in Washington, D.C., and we want you to join us as well. This is just a taste. Like, amazing. Think about how amazing these people are in the same room as you. You get to be in the same room as Brittini and hear that preaching again. Like, come on, y'all. You get to hear Robyn's theology in person. You get to hear Bec catch the Holy Ghost. Y'all know you want to be there. So come in April 23rd through 25th, Washington, D.C., to the conference. You also get to hear other people like Reverend William Barber and Alexia Salvatierra, Joe Daniels, Ramal Toon, Adam Bucko. It's going to be amazing. So go to the website, get on the email list, get involved, find out more about Transform, and about this amazing gathering we have coming this April. Thank you so much for being on tonight. Good night.
Good night. Thank you all.
Looks like we're still live.